Welcome to episode 3 of The Lighting Plan. On today's episode, we're going to meet David Auner AAC, an Austrian cinematographer who takes inspiration from classical paintings of the past.
Hi, I'm David Auner AAC, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today on the set of The Lighting Plan. I'm a cinematographer from Austria, and I have been in LA for about 10 years now. I mostly shoot features and documentary. Today we're going to be trying to emulate a painting. I tend to get inspired by the light in paintings quite a bit, and those images kind of stick inside of my head, and I do go back to them mentally, and sometimes I try to recreate what I saw in that painting with the physical means of photography or cinematography. The painting we're looking at today was created in 1801, and it's a portrait of Charlotte du Val. And for the longest time, it was attributed to a male artist, and only much later did they find out it was probably painted by Marie-Denise Villers, who was, same as her subject, a student of painting in a specific room at the Louvre. When you're trying to imitate or emulate a painting in photography or in filmmaking, it's always really hard in a way. Painters can cheat, and you can't, because you work with physics, right? So you have to really model your light, and you really have to paint with your light as much as you can to create the effect and the feeling you're going for. Whereas if you were to do this in painting, you could totally have one lighting effect over here and then just paint it different over here. We can't do that. If this is the same beam of light, it will behave the same. So that on one side is the hard part of doing this, but on the other hand, it's also the challenge and the really beautiful things about working from painting. So when we look at this, right, this is not realistic here. She's trying to give us a mood, and she's trying to give us a feeling. So this is very soft, but also has a certain glow to it, right? Like when you see this here or down here or on her face here. So this is not a realistic portrayal of the light that would be coming in. There's a harder edge on the far side of her head when you look at that has a little bit of a glow to it as well. But it's way harder than some of the light over here, right? And when you look at the shadow, also this is softish semi, right? And over here it's pretty hard. But the feeling of it is glowy and soft and warm. So this is something that she can do with her paint, but that would be really hard to precisely copy. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to a similar emotion and a similar feel to it. The process of recreating what we're looking at here usually starts with thinking about where the sources are. And when I say sources, that usually is one main source, right? But most likely there will be a cheat here and there where you actually have another light source or a third light source that is doing something specific, but usually there's one big kind of like path that the light is taking in most paintings. And in this case, when you think about it, the light is coming from the window behind her. So for the setup that we're doing today, we are using GVM lights. We have two FH400s, one with a 3x beam intensifier, and then we have one with a projection attachment. And we're also using a 1200 AIO. And we're using CRLS light bridge reflectors, which I love to use almost all the time. And also on top of that, we're using some foam core. We need a little more floor bounce, so I want her dress skirt to just become a little brighter. And a cool way to do that looks very natural is if we just have a piece of floor hit by a hard light, right? So what we'll do with this 400 LED with a projection attachment, we're going to be creating that hard spot on the floor. So I kind of like seeing any light source I put up that I don't know at 100, and then I'll take it from there, right? I'm just gonna put the shutters in here and create a random kind of like trapezoid shape. And then what I want to do is I want to throw this out of focus, right? So I don't want hard edges. So what I'm going to do is something like this. Okay, so we're at a little below a 1.4, and our key is reading at a 2.8 and 2/10, so that's nice, and that means we're about 2 stops below back there. Yeah, I kind of like this, and obviously with the fabric we're losing a lot, but I think this should read, and we're looking at 709 here. So in case we wanted to make this a little bit brighter, we have more leeway. When I light, I usually try to not necessarily copy what nature is doing, but I get inspiration from what nature is doing. So what we're doing here is we have the one light back here, right? The FH400, that's pretty much doing everything here that we see at first glance. We have a second light source I'll go to in a minute, but first let's talk about what this 400 watt light source is doing. So first we got the big reflector here. That's basically kind of giving us what the skylight of our makeshift fake window here would be doing. So that goes over here, lights our model's left-hand side. And with the bounce from the drawing board, we have the little reflector up there that's hitting right here. That's just giving us a little more kick. And we're basically stealing a little bit of the beam from the 400 that goes into this reflector with the other reflector to divert it over here. We have the third reflector over here. Again, it's taking a little bit of light from the beam that otherwise would be wasted, and we're putting it back into the scene. So we're giving a little bit of a fill on this side, hair light as well, and on the face, and also on her arm and shoulder here. And then the second element we did is, so when you think about it, daylight always has two components, right? You have the sky that's cooler and soft, and you have the sun that's warmer and harder usually. The sun, in this case, we didn't want it to be hitting her directly, so what we did is we have another 400 with a Lico barrel attachment, projection attachment, that's hitting the floor right here, and that's just giving us a little bit of a fill from the bottom and just kind of helps us down here under the drawing board and in her dress here and stuff like that, to just also make it a little more visually interesting, because that of course is in the frame as well. And then we have one last component. So in the room that the painting we're trying to imitate here, there would have been a wall on the other side, right? Or maybe there would have been a row of windows that also gave us something. Since we don't have a wall here, what we did is we took a 1200 and we bounced the 1200 into the far side of the studio. And you might think, why didn't we put up a muslin or a reflector to bounce into? Well, when you think about it, if you bounce into a white surface, what you're getting is uniform white light, right? But nature doesn't really work that way. So if you were in a museum or in a workshop where this could have been painted, most likely it wouldn't have been a uniform surface. So it would have been one thing for the ceiling, then something for the walls, the doors, maybe other people that are working there and all that stuff. So by bouncing this into this natural environment, we're getting a way more interesting bouncing back. So it's a way more interesting light. Okay, so this was kind of like what we were trying to do here, right? And obviously with the different color of the dress and all that, obviously we're not getting the exact same result, but it's about the mood, the emotion, and the feeling of it, right? And I think with that, we got very close. Obviously, we don't have the beautiful view outside the Louvre in Paris, which sad, but we couldn't have built it in time. But yeah, I think this is actually close, and I like what we're seeing here. It gives me a similar emotion, and that's what we were going after. So it's cool. I think we can shoot it. Let's do it. Let's roll. And everything good?
Ready.
Cool. Well then, camera is speed and action. Look away as if you're kind of like looking for inspiration. maybe over here somewhere. And then back onto your paper. Cool. I think that's it. I think one of my biggest influences would be Christian Berger, AAC, who shot The White Ribbon, and a lot of other Haneke work. Sophie Métigneux would be another one. She's a French cinematographer. She's not that well known in the US, but she's a wonderful cinematographer. With Christian, I've gotten to know him pretty well over the years, and I know where he comes from. And he started out shooting TV news, basically, and reportage on reversal. And that's kind of also where I come from. I started shooting industrial and corporate stuff with barely any equipment. So I think that's a connection there. But he also manages to make everything look as if nature could have done it, but make it the most beautiful version of nature, right? And I think that's something that I strive for when I shoot. The appeal for me of Sophie's work has a lot to do with how she uses the frame to deal with character and with who she's photographing. So she uses aspect ratio in a very masterful way. And she also has just a great way of feeling herself into her characters. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I inspired you to try something new the next time you're on set. And if you want to reach out and learn more about my work, you can either find me on Instagram or on davidauner.com.